So overall, when thinking back on this unit, I feel like I learned a lot about um, planning a unit, and I feel like I can really use what I learned in planning a unit. Previously, I would plan by each week, and I would have ideas for what my unit might look like, but I didn't lay it all out. I didn't lay out all the objectives, the summative assessment, the formative assessments I would complete, the learning outcomes that I was focusing on. So I think that after creating a unit plan and teaching lessons from that unit plan and doing assessments that I had created when I made the unit plan, I can see why it's important and the benefits of planning a whole unit ahead of time. So I want to try to continue to do that for sure in all of the subjects. Um, Learning how to unpack standards I think was really helpful because it is easy to look at a standard and think I'm just teaching this one idea or one concept, but actually when I started unpacking some of the standards, I realized there's multiple lessons that need to be taught before I can even get to one standard, or there's knowledge that the students need to have before they can accomplish that standard. So unpacking the standard was also really useful and helpful, and it's helped me when I look at a standard to think of it as a process and not just as like a one thing that the student is learning. The backwards planning, I was kind of already doing it, but I would sometimes get sidetracked. So now I find since learning this module, I'm not getting sidetracked with my planning anymore and really focusing on planning from my standards and designing all of my lesson plans based on the standards. And even there's been a couple moments in the past weeks where I've been doing my lesson planning for my school and caught myself planning a lesson and realize, oh, wait a minute, like some of these things that I'm doing in this lesson aren't related to the standard. They're like more advanced than the standard is actually asking, or it's off topic of the standard. So it's helped me to focus and stay organized, and be more efficient with the time that I have. So how effective I'd rate my initial planning of this unit. So the unit I planned was a math unit, and it was based on one standard, students being able to represent numbers 1 through 5 using concrete materials. I think that I was fairly effective planning it. I wouldn't change very much, like looking back on it after teaching some of the lessons from the unit. I wouldn't necessarily change the lessons I taught, but some of them, the order I taught them in was a little bit mixed, and I think that it was okay actually because, for example, I was teaching some of the numbers 1, 2, 3 earlier in the unit, and then 4 and 5 later in the unit. So some of the lessons or activities I repeated, but with different numbers and amounts. The revisions in the lesson plan or unit plan after teaching the lesson, some of the revisions that I had to make were especially around so in the lesson plan, some of the changes and revisions that I made, I revised actually the wording of the objective of the lesson. So instead of it saying students will be able to select a group of objects and tell how many for up to 5, when I actually did the activity, I was directing the students how many to select and they would count out that amount. So the students weren't choosing a number of objects and then telling me how many there were. They were trying to count out a group of objects to match a specific number. So that was something, after doing the activity, I realized the difference in the wording of that. So that was something I updated. Also, for review at the end, my original lesson plan included an activity in which the students would get up and move around, but since I was doing this during small group learning time, I realized that would be disruptive and it wouldn't really work well, especially during when I do small groups. I like students to stay at their tables, so I changed that in my lesson plan as well. Some insights that I have gained from the lesson planning and teaching, for sure, during doing the lesson planning and actually writing out the formative assessment that I will be conducting during the class has just helped me to be more aware of needing to do it, and then when I'm actually doing it during the lesson, I'm more aware of that I'm doing it and more prepared. So if I need to write something down, I have the resources with me, and that's obviously really helpful because the formative assessments during the lessons are what I will use to create my future lessons, as well as know where my students are standing and which students need extra help or which students need to be challenged more. So I think the lesson planning definitely helped me to think more about the assessment, the formative assessment, and be more aware of doing it while I was doing it in class. Parts of the unit plan that I thought were really critical. Again, the summative assessment, helping to tie in and relate all of the lessons, and then make sure that the assessments I'm conducting are directly related to exactly what I was teaching. So it just helped to really organize the flow of the teaching and then the assessment at the end, the summative assessment at the end. What else in the unit plan that was really critical? Also looking at how my different objectives, which level in the Bloom's taxonomy they meet. I think that part of the unit plan was really helpful because it just pushed me to make sure that I was creating lessons and activities that were challenging my students in the higher levels of Bloom's taxonomy, not just asking students to remember something or understand something, but to analyze and to evaluate. So I thought that part of the unit plan is really useful and important. In the lesson planning also, the space for adding where I will differentiate the lesson plans, I think that's helpful. It just helps me to start thinking about it before teaching and not just while I'm in the classroom differentiating in the moment. I think it was useful being able to create the lesson plan, have the different ways I would differentiate for whatever student needs there are in the classroom. And finally, how did planning help to know about student performances? Like I had said before, the students doing the formative and summative assessments and having those in the plan was really useful. I think just also the more clearly my plans were laid out, the more aware I was during my teaching. I think because maybe I was more planned, so there was less stress on me, on my mind while I was teaching, because I had a clear idea of where my teaching was going, where the activity was going. So then when I was observing students doing formative assessments, it was clear whether or not, okay, are they meeting the objective that I clearly had planned for, or were they exceeding the objective, or did they need teaching assistance from a teacher? So I think for sure the planning definitely helps me to be more aware of student performance, because I know what the objective is, specific objectives are that the students are supposed to be meeting. Overall, like I had said at the beginning, I think that this module really helped me to understand the importance of unit planning and see why unit planning can really help make teaching and learning more cohesive, and it's more organized, so there's less wasted time, which in my classroom, especially in my school, I have really limited time with my students, so that's something very crucial. And also the unpacking the standard and the backwards planning is really important for me, because it's easy for me to get sidetracked when I feel passionate about a topic, or I think students will be really interested in a topic, but if it doesn't tie to a standard, then I need to remember standards are the most important thing to teach, and then finding a way to link that topic if it's possible. And one note about the lesson plans, they were quite long. Like, for example, my lesson plan ended up being like almost 5 pages for like a 20-minute lesson. And so I do have a hard time imagining myself creating one of those lesson plans for every lesson I teach, because that would be like at least two of those I'd be creating every single day, and the time it takes to create them, I just have a really hard time imagining myself being able to create those every single day, or even maybe needing to create those every single day. But I definitely think for like keystone lessons that are important for the unit, I can definitely see myself using that template, or something, an adapted version of the Teach Now lesson plan template, for like larger important lessons that I'll be doing in the class. But I can't see myself using that lesson plan template to plan every lesson I teach each day for the whole week. I just don't think I have the time to create all of that, and it's too bad, because I did notice when I was teaching the lesson that I was able to, like I said before, have like a clear idea of the lesson because it was so well planned out. But I think if I do it for really important lessons, then that's also a fair compromise.